Who is the main enemy of America? Is that Iran? China? M&Ms? Well, according to some, it's Ukrainians.
Today, when the president of Ukraine arrived at the White House dressed like the manager of a strip club and started to demand money.
Dude, I thought strip club owners were kind of your thing. So let's be clear, the US support of Ukraine during the Russian war has been unprecedented. Both Republicans and Democrats are doing their best. We Ukrainians are infinitely grateful to the American people and other countries who directly help us to survive and continue doing it despite all the risks. At the same time, there are some people who took another side in this war. They took it long before this full-scale invasion of Ukraine because they just love this guy Putin and his authoritarianism. And their love for uncontrolled power is so strong that no genocide and war could change their mind. Who are they? Let's find out. But before we go next, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to our channel, and tell your friends about Ukrainian Toronto television. We are covering the Russian war in Ukraine and exposing Russian assets abroad, and we would love to win that YouTube algorithm lottery and get some views. So not so long ago, horrible Zelensky came to the United States to thank the American people for the military support and argue why more is needed. But the far-right internet just blew up. Dozens of commentators were outraged. No, not by the biggest war of aggression since World War II and by Russian uncontrolled desire of ruining everything around. Vocal far-rights were outraged by Zelensky wearing a sweatshirt and cargo pants in a Congress, which is, by the way, a reference to another wartime leader fighting Nazis in Europe who came to the US pleading for military assistance. This ungrateful piece of shit does not have the decency to wear a suit to the White House, now respect the country that is funding his survival. Tracksuit wearing Eastern European conman mafia. Our leaders fell for it. They have disgraced our all. What an incredible insult. Now that's enthusiasm. If we could produce rockets from the shitty tweets like this, we would win the war already. Nevertheless, this was a last straw. What a despicable man this Zelensky guy.
So that we can weigh in on which guy in a sweatsuit gets to rule Crimea?
That was a congressman from Florida, Matt Gaetz, who's famous for his sex trafficking allegations and an attempt to overthrow the US government. Apparently, he's more or less okay with being in a Congress dressed like this. But anyway, it couldn't be about the outfit, right? Who in their own mind would care how Zelensky is dressed up? There should be other reasons. Just after ranting about Zelensky's outfit, Matt Gaetz tried to justify his outrage.
$12.9 billion in this bill to prop up the Ukrainian economy. $300 million for Ukrainian agriculture, another $300 million for Ukrainian border patrol, and in the same bill, we are tying the hands of our own border patrol. So Ukraine gets economic development, agriculture, border patrol, and we get racial equity mandates.
Oh, so he's jealous of Ukraine? Well, I don't know, mate. We could switch. Ukrainians could go move to DC and you could go enjoy some economic development somewhere in Bakhmut under constant Russian shellings and rocket strikes. Anyway, of course, this is some high-level bullshit, and anything Ukraine gets right now directly are just margins in the scale of the US economy. But for Ukraine, it is a vital assistance so the young democratic country would not be destroyed by the huge fascist empire, which wants to introduce the New World Order with spheres of influence, constant wars like this one, which Americans will eventually have to fight in case if Ukraine loses. But wait, that's not important. You know what's important? If Ukraine's president gets into Vogue. While we send Ukraine 60 billion in aid, Zelensky is doing photo shoots for Vogue magazine. These people think we are nothing but a bunch of suckers. Man, she's so blinded by rage, she would attack everything that sounds like woke. But Anyway, this tweet comes right when the Russian army finished razing to the ground Severodonetsk, the city of 100,000 residents. The battle, Ukraine unfortunately lost because of hesitance and military assistance from the West.
Everything now depends on what the West gives us, says Kibitsky. Ukraine has 1 artillery piece to 10 to 15 Russian artillery pieces. Our Western partners have given us about 10% of what they have.
And yeah, those Voth photo shoots are made not because someone likes to give like 15 interviews a day. It is to explain people in the West why Ukraine needs their help and why people like Congresswoman Boebert are full of shit. Zelensky will come on a wrestling show and fight Hulk Hogan if it will help to get more weapons and save more Ukrainian lives. That's how the modern world operates. Anyway, the outrage because of the Voth publication doesn't come alone. It comes in a package along with opposing and assistance to Ukraine and spreading fakes and manipulations about it.
What I didn't hear tonight was a clear explanation of where the first $50 billion we sent to support their efforts went. Until Congress receives a full audit on where our money has already gone, I will not support sending additional money to this war.
Well, we have to answer that. First of all, Zelensky didn't receive $50 billion. Ukraine has received $28 billion in military assistance by the end of January, which is around 3% of the annual US defense budget. Second, that's military assistance. It goes into trucks, which fire rockets, and also those rockets for them. Those are physical machines which America transfers to Ukraine from its own stocks, which you can't sell or steal or use on your farm or something. And money is used to buy the US Army new, more modern guns instead of those Cold War era ones they are giving to Ukraine. This scheme also gives the American people jobs, which make America great because Americans have jobs and economy. And the results of these transfers are obvious, as it was in this fall campaign of the Ukrainian armed forces.
Russia has confirmed it is pulling back forces from 2 areas in the Kharkiv region, and it comes after Ukrainian forces this week staged quite a successful counteroffensive in the area.
Jubilation in the Ukrainian city of Kherson, the country's troops liberating residents after months of Russian occupation.
Imagine being outraged about defeating the Russian army for 3% of the US annual defense budget. That's like Avengers Endgame, but instead of fighting Thanos, Iron Man just gives some Jewish guy his old suit and wishes luck. Anyway, Boebert and Matt Gaetz were so mad about Zelensky asking for assistance to stop the fascist empire that they made a public stunt denying him in applause, and oh boy, that made someone really happy.
There were a couple of brave ones in the hall. Congressmen Gaetz and Boebert did not wipe out their palms. They did not jump up. They said defiantly, Washington feels tired of the boundless aid to Ukraine.
Yeah, that was Russian TV. And when it doesn't praise Tucker Carlson or other far-right politicians, it usually calls for mass murder of Ukrainians, nuclear attacks on the United States, and approximately every European state. Being praised on these shows is like getting an honorable mention in Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will. By the way, we had a full video about it. You can enjoy Russian madness clicking the pop-up banner above, here or somewhere over here. But the main star of this anti-Ukrainian coalition is of course Marjorie Taylor Green.
I have a major issue with billions and billions, and we're talking about tens and tens and billions of American hard-earned US tax dollars being spent for another country's border for a proxy war with Russia, nuclear Russia.
Right, I get it. I would be against funding one side in a war too, especially if I were on the other side.
It's now a familiar clip of video. Georgia Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Green welcomed by Nick Fuentes at his America First Political Action Conference in Orlando this past Friday, just after Fuentes rallied the crowd.
Can we give a round of applause for Russia? Yes. Absolutely, absolutely.
You know what? That was the next day after Russia started the full-scale invasion, bombing Ukrainian cities and killing people for nothing. Green had her speech right after this, being announced by a real Nazi, Nick Fuentes. And once again, we are not against Republicans or conservatives. Those guys made a lot and are still doing a lot to break this evil empire called Russia. And if not for this hate towards the communists in the past, lots of people, not only Ukrainians, would still be enslaved by this death machine. But there are morons who call themselves conservatives, who just masturbate to the death of the Ukrainians, who just would love to see us dead, just so that they would prove to be right, that Putin is a good leader, that fascism works, that destroying human rights and discriminating entire ethnic groups can make the world a better place.
We continue to support Tsar Putin in the war effort. Can we get an 07 in chat? We want to just keep in mind, we want to keep our brave soldiers in the white, blue, and red in our prayers and in our thoughts as they continue to liberate Ukraine from the great Satan and from the evil empire in the world, which is the United States.
Yeah, this dude. He, by the way, recently had dinner with Trump in his residency in Mar-a-Lago, and his events, America First Political Action Conference, hosts many prominent politicians, such as Arizona Representative Paul Gossar, who opposed aid in Ukraine from the day one, and Marjorie Taylor Green of Georgia, who's really active in obstructing the military assistance.
I would like to announce that I've introduced a privileged resolution, and what this will do is it will hold our government accountable for all of the funding for Ukraine.
Well, now it makes much more sense. The part where Ms. Green fights the military assistance directly. The part which doesn't is an accountability demand. Even Republicans acknowledge that there is a strong oversight and accountability.
They're accounting for every spare part that's coming into the country. Plus, we have an inspector general from the Pentagon who's going over, I think, next month. I was very impressed by the level of accountability, and so this argument that somehow the money's being wasted, I don't think holds water.
And yeah, the accountability isn't actually the problem. It is the existence of this assistance itself and some suspicious attitude towards Ukrainians.
It's heartbreaking to see these disabled Ukrainian soldiers here in the halls of Congress being used as pawns to pressure our Congress to give Americans hard-earned tax dollars to Zelensky.
Green doesn't stop at smearing Ukrainian veterans. She even comes up with some wild conspiracies.
But let's talk about the aid to Ukraine. Here in the news, we're just finding out about the situation with FTX and the cryptocurrency. So is American people's taxpayer dollars going to fund aid in Ukraine, but yet it's really funding something else that's happening, maybe ending up in Democrat donors' pockets? Was that helping Democrat campaigns? Was that helping Democrat candidates get elected?
Oh sure, you are worried about accountability and therefore you spread the wildest conspiracy theory that Ukrainians somehow gave money to Democrats through the FTX cryptocurrency exchange. That's what Ukrainians do when they are about to be killed. Nevertheless, the chances of these guys to stop military assistance to Ukraine are not that big yet, considering that most of the Republicans and Democrats like democracy more than fascism or communism. But what they are unfortunately successful in is smearing Ukraine and the cause itself. There is whole informational campaign which usually comes down to Tucker Carlson, who's famously pro-Russian. And while we had a whole episode on Tucker, what's even better than Tucker himself is his guests.
When you actually look at what Zelensky's democracy is, you see no freedom of the press. He has shut down any media that he does not control, his government does not control. He has gotten political opposition arrested, made sure that that's happened.
Whoa, that was Tulsi Gabbard, another American public figure and ex-congresswoman. What she's talking about is sanctions against Russian-funded media owned by a Russian agent who was going to run Ukraine after the occupation. This guy is the close friend of Putin. The Russian president is actually a godfather for his daughter. That's the opposition Tulsi Gabbard was talking about. Russians. That's like complaining about killing bin Laden and banning ISIS TV in the United States.
As you mentioned, he shut down the biggest Ukraine church in the country. And I found this quote today. He has actually threatened to punish, quote, any Christian caught worshiping in unapproved ways.
Oh, sure. That church she was talking about, it's not Ukrainian. It is a Russian church run by the Russian government. Those are the guys blessing the killing of the Ukrainians. And until recently, they controlled a big chunk of Orthodox churches in Ukraine. Fuck. And for God's sake, both Ukrainian and Russian churches are religiously worshipping in the same way. They are both Orthodox, and nobody threatened anyone for their fucking rituals. That's like really fucked up. It's not even a manipulation. That's like Holocaust denial level bullshit. And talking about Holocaust, yeah, how could you proceed without some anti-Semitism? It's like a toy in a cereal box for all those fascist morons.
Zelensky is a globalist puppet for Soros and the Clintons.
For those of you who are not aware of the secret code language of the modern fascists, globalists and Soros are the two code names for a Jew. And Zelensky is half Jewish, which makes him half Soros. So for all of you conspiracy theorists who didn't know, now you have some job to do. For instance, draw an anti-Semitic cartoon or something. But when he's not a Jew, he's also a Nazi.
Speaking of Nazis, let's go to moment number 4 that you should all see. Zelensky's speech.
Yeah, Steven Crowder, cool dude. He also has a strong position on Russians.
Russia could take all over, you know what? Russia could take all of Europe and it wouldn't even affect us that much. If we didn't want it to, we could be entirely independent.
Sure, mate. Especially the tough guy like you. Why would you care if the whole world would be in a constant full-scale war? You're not a coward or something, right? And the list of those people spreading outright bullshit and trying to obstruct the assistance to Ukraine goes on and on. There is hardly one far-right speaker who hasn't made such statements by this day, and it makes you wonder, why is that? Why is there a serious fraction of American politicians, TV hosts, and media personas who spread Russian propaganda, smear Ukrainians with any chance they had, and try to actively obstruct the military assistance? Well, there could be several explanations. First, and that could be an easy one, they could just work for Russia. We don't have any proof, and that's just a conspiracy, but just saying, that's what Russia does, and it is possible.
A former FBI counterintelligence agent is accused of secretly working for a Russian billionaire he was investigating. Charles McGonigal was charged in an indictment that was unsealed today.
Yeah, like that. Second, they just love Putin. He's the ultimate fascist. He installed a dictatorship in his country, persecuted gay people, made Russian church one of FSB departments, and did whatever fascists do, you name it.
Putin ain't woke. He is anti-woke. The Russians, people still know which bathroom to use.
These people are so fucked up by this desire to bring everyone to their knees and put people in prison without trial that they did not change their opinion after Putin started the war, because they like it. And also the third reason, which could relate to the most people who trust those guys, is just what contrarians do. They oppose everything normal, whatever is going on. You can't just be on the same side with most people, with mainstream. That's what feeds the political careers of Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Green. In this way, they can oppose everything at any time and win in any situation. That's what happens when resentful kids are going in politics instead of playing in a punk rock band. And we might not know for sure what that is about, but I guess it is up to Americans to decide what such things mean.
This is genius. Putin declares a big portion of the Ukraine. Putin declares it as independent. Oh, that's wonderful.
Praising Putin specifically for human rights abuses, authoritarianism, and his killing spree around the world. And after that, repeating Putin's talking points and trying to put a finger on a scale from the other side.
First come the tanks, then come the nukes. Get this crazy war ended now. So easy to do.
This should probably make everyone worried. worried like in when your school bus driver is an alcoholic crush dummy, especially when he's getting more and more power. And we get it, we understand why those people have an audience in America. Many people have been screwed up by something in this life, and many people don't like or afraid of something. For example, the cancel culture, which can sometimes be just, but also can destroy people's lives for nothing, because something was okay 3 years ago and suddenly is not okay now.
44% of Americans think they know what it means to be canceled, while another 56% hasn't heard much of the term. Some think cancel culture is unjust and goes too far.
But listen, this is not some kind of a culture war. This one is very real. Tens of thousands of people are killed. Children are raped on their mother's eyes, kidnapped and taken away from their parents and literally sent to Siberia. And people who are doing it are trying to make this a new norm in 21st century. And Ukrainians and the whole civilized world are trying to stop it. And helping Ukraine in defeating this evil is not just some moral obligation. It is an investment in preventing it from spreading. Ukrainian soldiers defeating the Russian army on a battlefield will ensure that US soldiers won't have to die on such a battlefield a couple years later. Destroyed Russian army will be a message that no war of aggression will be won ever again. And maybe, just maybe, it will prevent Putins of this world from waging those wars ever again. At least for another 80 years or so. Thank you.